All right, here we go with our Mod 46 Part 2 video. So we had just discussed how the government buys things in the product market. You know, the government buys cars and desks and all of that kind of stuff for their offices and other government things. So that's government spending. All right, so let's go over here to where it says financial markets. So financial markets are banks, pretty much. You can call them banks. And they also, what they do the most is give loans, loans of money. Now, I really shouldn't say give loans because really what banks do is they sell loans. So banks will loan people money, and in return, the people have to pay them back the money plus interest. So it's kind of like if I took out a loan, I would be buying the ability to have that money right now, and in return I have to give the money back plus more. So these financial markets are giving out loans or selling loans. Now, so we can have, let's see, an arrow going from the financial markets to the households, and we can label that arrow loans, because money goes from the banks to the households in exchange for loans. But we also have an arrow going from the households back to the banks. And so what I'm saying here is that people send money to banks. And yes, we do. We call that our savings accounts, right? When we save money in the bank, we are giving the money to that. We are lending our money to the bank, and the bank uses it to lend it to other people. So we will call that household savings. Now we're going to have another arrow going from the financial markets to the government. And so that's saying that banks send money to the government. And yes, they do, because our government takes out loans all the time. So they are sending loan money to the government, and what we call that is government borrowing. So when we say borrowing, that means taking out loans. So you might want to add loans to that. So they are sending loan money out there. Okay, now let's see here. Down here, we have something that says the rest of the world, parentheses, foreign markets. So when we think about this circular flow diagram, all of this stuff up here is happening inside the United States, and then the rest of the world would be down here. So here is showing that there is money that leaves our product market and goes to the rest of the world. And then there is money that leaves the rest of the world and enters our product market. One of those arrows is going to be exports, and one of those arrows is going to be imports. But I cannot label them until I think about it. Okay, the arrows represent money. Imports means that it was made in another country and sold here in the United States. And in return, we got that thing, that product, but in return, we had to send money. So the arrow going from the United States to the rest of the world is imports. And people get really upset by that and really kind of confused, because we know that with imports, the product is coming into the United States, but these arrows represent money, not the product. So the product is coming into the United States, but the money is leaving. So exports, the product is made in the United States, the product is sold to another country, and in return, that other country gives us money. So the arrow coming from the rest of the world into the United States is exports, because that is what the money is doing in that situation. All right, next one from the rest of the world. We have an arrow going from the rest of the world into our financial markets, our banks, and we have an arrow coming from our banks into our foreign market, the rest of the world. So both of those are loans, and they're both called foreign loans. Now, this arrow here that is going from the rest of the world into the US financial market, that is the United States borrowing money from financial markets, banks in other countries. So the United States, they borrow the money. So the money goes from the rest of the world into our financial markets. So we're going to put US borrowing money from other countries. US borrowing money from other countries. And then this arrow that's going from the US financial markets to the rest of the world is saying that that money is leaving the United States, going to the rest of the world, and it's in loans, and that would be other countries borrowing US money. So other countries borrowing US money. Hey, we're getting there. Just a couple other things. We have an arrow going from the financial markets to the firms. So when do banks send money to firms? Well, when businesses or firms take out loans. So that line is called business loans. Okay, we have one thing on here that we have not labeled yet, and that is this arrow going out of the product market and into businesses or firms. And we are going to call that GDP. And in our next module, we're going to define what that is. Another thing you need to know at the bottom here, it says total money coming into the box is equal to the money going out. So if we were to draw a more detailed arrow, some of the arrows would be way thicker than other arrows. So notice that households, they're getting money from two places, wages and loans. And money is leaving the household as consumer spending and as household savings. And where else does our money go to? We send money to the banks as savings. We send money to firms to buy things. And we send money to the government. And money that we send to the government, of course, is called taxes. And then government sends money back to us. When does the government send people money? The answer is called transfer payments. And let's define transfer payments somewhere on here. Transfer payments. That is what we kind of refer to as welfare. So that would be any time that the government is giving money to people to help them out. So, that could be like EBT or housing assistance or, food, anything that, we commonly call welfare, or in econ, we call that transfer payments, because the money is being transferred from one place through taxes to another place, or from some people to other people through the process of taxes. Now, up here, let's put some more notes. We know that households means people. We know that firms means businesses. We know that the government means government. And then the foreign market, you might want to add in that is imports and exports. and loans. And you might want to add in that financial markets means banks, and that means talking about loans. So if we were to look at this circular flow diagram in its entirety, we can learn a lot of different things. If I said, hey, your assignment is to write 5 different sentences that you can learn from looking at the circular flow diagram, you can learn the following things. You can learn that, like I said before, households get money from their wages and from loans from banks and from transfer payments from the government. And then households spend money or send money out of their households in the forms of consumer spending and taxes and household savings. See? You don't even know what any of that means, or you don't need to know what any of that means, but you can say it because it's right here in the diagram. You know from the diagram that when the US brings in imported goods, they're sending money to the rest of the world. You know that from this diagram, that when the US exports goods, makes them in the US, and then sells them somewhere else, they're getting money from the rest of the world. And I don't think I finished this thought before, but the total money coming into a box is equal to the money going out. So that means that these 3 arrows of wages, loans, and transfer payments coming into a household are equal to the amount of money going out of the household in savings, consumer spending, and taxes. And that kind of makes sense, right? So like all of the money that a household gets, what can you do with it? You can pay your taxes with it, you can spend it, and you can save it. And most of our savings is done in banks rather than, like in an envelope under our bed or something like that. So that sort of makes sense to us. So I encourage you guys to spend more time looking at this diagram and thinking, what can you learn from it? And make sure to do those practice problems and show up to our Google Meet sessions. Bye.